It is well known within the circle that Lucian, the head of the Lu group, has a violent temperament and is a madman whom everyone avoids. Recently, he has taken a fancy to a female college student who just graduated. The wedding date is set for next week. After my fiancé Ryan learned about it, he locked himself in the study for 3 days. I carried sobering soup to find him, but through the door crack, I heard his conversation with his friend. You must ensure that on the wedding day, Selina can board the plane smoothly. I absolutely cannot watch her marry that madman Lucian. His friend assured confidently, don't worry, we've arranged everything. But what about Sherry? If you leave her alone at the wedding, will Lucian let her off? Ryan sneered. No matter how mad he is, he's still my brother. He knows about my relationship with Sherry. At most, he'll make things difficult for her, but he won't really do anything to her. Once Selina and I settle abroad, we can bring her out. As the words fell, the scalding sobering soup in my hand spilled entirely onto the carpet. But later, when Ryan was preparing to elope with Selina at the airport, he saw me and Lucian in the VIP lounge. The expression on Ryan's face could be called the best disaster film of the year. He dragged a suitcase with one hand and tightly held Selina's hand with the other, like a warrior heading toward freedom. The moment he saw me, his steps abruptly halted in place. Beside him, Selina's pitiful face drained of all color. Her gaze bypassed me, staring fixedly at the man beside me, her body trembling uncontrollably. Lucian. He was leisurely wiping his fingers with a wet wipe, as if he had just touched something dirty. Noticing the two burning gazes, he lifted his eyelids, his pitch-black pupils staring like at prey, with a morbid scrutiny. Seen enough? His voice was indifferent, yet it made Ryan and Selina tremble simultaneously. Ryan's gaze finally shifted from me to Lucian's face, then abruptly back to me. His brain was evidently undergoing a cosmic explosion. Sherry? Why are you here? You and him. I picked up the coffee in front of me and gently blew on the steam. As you see. What do you mean as I see? Ryan uncontrollably raised his voice, you should be at the wedding venue. Why are you with my brother? Selina tugged at his sleeve and timidly spoke. Ryan, don't get agitated, is there some misunderstanding? Sister Sherry, she. I laughed. Sister Sherry? Miss Selina, I remember we're not that close. Selina's face turned pale then red, her eyes quickly filling with tears, looking as if she had suffered a great injustice. Ryan's heartache immediately showed on his face, he glared at me as if I were some unforgivable sinner. Sherry. Be polite to Selina. She doesn't know anything. Oh? She doesn't know you're taking her to elope? Or she doesn't know you're leaving me alone at the wedding to bear Lucian's wrath for her? My voice wasn't loud, but it clearly reached their ears. Ryan's face instantly became extremely vivid. He opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. The silent Lucian, at this moment, threw the used wet wipe into the trash bin. He stood up, his tall figure bringing an extremely strong sense of oppression. He walked to my side, naturally placing his arm on the back of my chair, a pose full of possessiveness. He didn't look at me, his gaze fell on Selina's pale face, that looked contemptuous and ruthless, making Ryan shudder. You are Selina? Selina trembled and softly hummed an affirmation. Lucian expressionlessly oh-ed, then took out a red booklet from his suit inner pocket and casually threw it on the table. Let me introduce myself. Lucian, Sherry's legal husband. The marriage certificate on the table was glaringly red. Ryan's eyes stared fixedly at the two red booklets, as if trying to stare through them. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. When did you? Just when you locked yourself in the study, plotting how to be a hero. I interrupted him lightly. I stood up, walked to Lucian's side, and linked my arm with his. Ryan, didn't you always think that leaving me to your brother, he'd at most make things difficult for me? Now, I've voluntarily become his wife, you should be happy for me. After all, I love you so much, of course, I have to help you solve the trouble for your most beloved woman. Every word of mine was like a knife, precisely stabbing into Ryan's heart. His face went from red to white, then to green, finally left with only ashen defeat. Sherry, you. Wish you a pleasant journey. I linked arms with Lucian and brushed past them. Behind us was the sound of suitcase wheels rubbing against the ground and Selina's suppressed sobs. Lucian's steps didn't pause at all. It wasn't until we sat in that black Bentley with an arrogant license plate that he turned his head to look at me. The light inside the car was dim, half his face was hidden in shadow, his expression obscure. Feel relieved? I leaned back in the seat, watching the scenery rapidly receding outside the window. It's okay. That's good. He withdrew his gaze. Remember our deal, Sherry. I've given you the position of Mrs. Liu, you'd better not cause me trouble. The car interior fell back into a suffocating silence. Lucian's home was more like a cold fortress than a home. Huge floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist black-white-gray design, so spacious that one could hear their own heartbeat. A middle-aged butler expressionlessly took our coats. Sir, Miss Sherry, dinner is ready. The butler paused and added, additionally, we just received news that the rival has voluntarily given up on the southern city land. Lucian hummed, his voice without fluctuation. Making him bankrupt and making him give up are two different things. He unbuttoned his cuffs, his tone cold and ruthless. Proceed as planned. I want him kneeling and begging me. I followed behind him, looking at the long dining table with exquisite dishes, but only 2 sets of tableware. Throughout the entire meal, we didn't say a word. The principle of no talking while eating or sleeping was carried out to the extreme by him. After dinner, the butler led me to the second-floor bedroom. Miss Sherry, this is the room sir prepared for you. I looked at the secondary bedroom almost as large as the master, feeling no ripples in my heart. As soon as I closed the door, I smelled a faint sandalwood fragrance in the room. There was a small incense burner on the bedside. I didn't know if jumping into this abyss voluntarily was right or wrong. Thank you. Just as I said that, my phone vibrated crazily. It was Ryan. I hung up directly. He persistently called again. I hung up again and then blocked him. The world became quiet. Not a few minutes later, a strange number sent a text message. Sherry. Answer the phone. What exactly do you want? Are you crazy? I could imagine Ryan's furious appearance. I leisurely replied with 4 words. Making room for you. Then I blocked this number too. After showering, I opened social media. Selina didn't disappoint me. She posted a picture on Facebook, a pitch-black sea, with the caption, "Some lights, thought to be redemption, pushed me into deeper darkness." Below, there were already many comments from our mutual friends. What's wrong with Selina? Unhappy? Baby, don't be sad, it will get better. Did someone bully you? Truly a good example of playing both sides. Soon, my Facebook started flashing too. Sherry, what's up with you and Ryan? I heard his brother is marrying Selina? Sherry, what did you do to Ryan? Selina is crying. Looking at these questions, I only found them laughable. Just as I was about to turn off my phone, a new Facebook notification popped up. It was Lucian. His Facebook was perennially blank, this was the only post. A photo. The red marriage certificate held by a hand with distinct knuckles, background the VIP lounge I had just been in. The caption was even simpler, just 2 words. Mine. In an instant, all my Facebook groups exploded. Those who had just been questioning me all fell silent. As I was dazed, the door was knocked. I opened the door. Lucian stood outside, wearing a black silk robe, collar slightly open. He handed me his phone. Delete it. I looked down, it was Selina's melancholic Facebook post. The page showed, this content has been deleted. He raised his eyes to look at me, a triumphant, almost morbid possessiveness flashing in his gaze. I don't like my wife having any form of entanglement with people who can't make it to the stage. He walked in front of me, his tall figure completely enveloping me, those pitch-black eyes filled with unmelting ice. Including social networks. He lowered his voice, with an unquestionable warning, "Don't forget your identity, Sherry. The cost of causing trouble, you can't afford." "Understood." I nodded. He turned to leave, then stopped. "Also. Tomorrow, back to the old house for dinner, don't embarrass me." After saying that, he left without looking back. I closed the door, leaned against it, and only then discovered my palms were full of cold sweat. Making a deal with this man was no different from seeking the tiger's skin. The family banquet at the Liu family old house had an atmosphere colder than Siberia's cold current. Beside the long rosewood dining table sat the Liu family patriarch, Elder Eldon. There was also Ryan, and beside him, the restless Selina. When Lucian and I took our seats, everyone's gazes fell on us. Ryan's eyes were like knives laced with poison, wishing to carve holes in me. Selina lowered her head, shoulders slightly trembling, looking like a porcelain doll about to shatter. Elder Eldon had a somber face, heavily knocking his cane on the ground. "Nonsense." Lucian acted as if he didn't hear, picked up the serving chopsticks, and placed a rib in my bowl. "Try it, the chef here makes good sweet and sour ribs." His actions were natural and intimate, as if we were a couple in love for many years. I cooperatively took a bite and smiled at him. Very delicious." Across from us, Ryan's hand gripping the chopsticks had knuckles turning white. The meal was eaten amid undercurrents. After the meal, the servants brought soup. Selina carried the soup, stood up, and walked toward me with unsteady steps. "Sister Sherry, oh no, sister-in-law, this is specially stewed for you by the kitchen, try it." Her voice carried a sobbing tone, eyes red-rimmed. Just when she was one step away from me, her foot suddenly twisted. "Ah!" With a cry, the entire bowl of scalding soup splashed straight toward me. I subconsciously leaned back. Lucian beside me reacted faster, he pulled me into his arms and blocked the soup with his own back. Hiss. The scalding liquid seeped through the thin shirt, he grunted. The entire living room instantly became chaotic. "Ryan." Selina fell to the ground, her ankle twisted at a weird angle, tears streaming from pain. Ryan rushed over in one stride, nervously hugging her. "Selina. Are you okay? Did you get scalded?" He checked Selina's arms, completely ignoring Lucian who had blocked the entire bowl of soup for me. Then, he raised his head, angrily glaring at me. "Sherry. I knew it. You're just jealous of Selina. How can you be so vicious?" I was a bit dazed from his roar. Sitting in Lucian's arms, watching their deep affection drama, for a moment I didn't know what expression to make. Lucian helped me sit properly and stood up himself. He took off his soaked shirt, revealing a large patch of reddened skin on his back. The butler hurriedly ran over with the medicine box. Lucian ignored him, just coldly looking at Ryan. "You say, she did it?" Ryan held Selina, stiff-necked. "If not her, who else?" Selina was walking fine, how could she suddenly fall? "Is that so?" Lucian picked up the phone on the table and opened a video. In the video, Selina carried the soup, looking at me with venomous eyes, then deliberately twisted her foot when approaching me, splashing the soup over. The angle was crystal clear. I just thought the new Chinese-style decoration at home was nice and casually filmed it, didn't expect to capture such a wonderful scene. Lucian's voice was calm, yet it dropped the entire living room's temperature to freezing. Ryan's face instantly became a palette. He incredulously looked at the video, then at Selina crying pitifully in his arms. Selina's body stiffened, looking at Lucian, her eyes showed fear for the first time. Elder Eldon trembled with anger, his cane knocking the floor tiles buzzing again. "Family misfortune. Family misfortune." The room was deathly silent. Ryan's lips quivered, unable to say a word. And Selina, her gaze toward me was no longer disguised weakness and grievance. Inside was pure, unmasked resentment. I knew this was just the beginning. The family banquet ended unhappily. On the way back in the car, I held an ice pack, applying it to the scald on Lucian's back. It was red over a large area, with small blisters in some places. Hiss. He drew in a cold breath. If it hurts, say so, I'll be gentler. I slowed my movements. He looked at me through the rearview mirror, his expression complex. Why not explain? Explain what? Explain I didn't push her? I tugged at the corner of my mouth. Would anyone believe it? In Ryan's heart, Selina was a white lotus needing careful protection, and I was the vicious side character trying to tarnish her. Lucian. Thank you. Regardless of his purpose, today, he did protect me. He didn't speak, just closed his eyes. The car drove back to that cold fortress. After getting out, Lucian suddenly spoke. Move to the master bedroom. I was stunned for a moment. He didn't look at me, walking straight inside. I hate trouble. Living together avoids incidents like today. His reasons were always so grandiose. I didn't refuse. Late at night, I lay on the excessively large bed in the master bedroom. The side was empty. Lucian hadn't returned. But I received Ryan's call. He changed numbers. Sherry, come down, I'm outside. His voice carried thick fatigue and hoarseness. Something? Let's talk. Nothing to talk about. Please, Sherry. He was almost begging, just 5 minutes. I was silent for a moment. Okay. I wore pajamas, draped a coat, and went downstairs. Outside the villa gate, Ryan leaned against the car, smoking, with cigarette butts littering the ground. Seeing me, he immediately extinguished the cigarette and walked over quickly. Sherry. Speak. Through the iron gate, I looked at him coldly. His eyes were full of red bloodshot, the whole person haggard. Why do this? Marrying my brother benefits neither him nor you. Didn't you already plan for me? No matter how mad he is, he won't really do anything to me. I imitated his tone from back then. Ryan's face flashed with embarrassment. I was just. I didn't expect you would. Didn't expect I would turn your carefully planned hero saves beauty into a joke? He painfully closed his eyes. Sherry, leave my brother, okay? I know I was wrong, let's start over. Whatever you want, I can give you, projects, shares, all of it. He started promising, like buying off a discardable commodity. I laughed. From my neck, I removed the necklace worn for 3 years. The pendant was a small platinum ring, the one he slipped on my finger when proposing. Later he said wearing the ring on the hand was too flashy, better as a necklace close to the heart, representing him forever in my heart. Thinking now, it's ironic enough to be a negative case in social news. I unzipped my coat, through the iron gate bars, stuffed the necklace into his suit pocket. Ryan, from the moment I heard those words, we were over. This, return to you. Also, don't come find me again. After all, I'm now your sister-in-law. I turned, no longer looking at him. Behind, came his suppressed roar and the sound of something smashing. Back in the room, I looked up and stiffened. Lucian stood at the end of the second-floor corridor, shrouded in shadow. He didn't know how long he had stood there. It wasn't quietly watching, his gaze was like a net, with heavy oppression and dark possessiveness, locking me firmly from above. Seeing me look, he said nothing and turned into the study. That night, I slept exceptionally soundly. The feeling of severing the past was like unloading a 1,000-pound burden. The next day, the Lu Group's internal system released a new personnel transfer. Ryan was transferred from the headquarters core project team to the Northwest branch as vice president. A promotion in name but demotion in reality, exile. Once the news came out, the company buzzed with discussion. Everyone knew this once highly favored second young master had completely lost power. And the fuse for all this was me. In the afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was Ryan's mother, my former prospective mother-in-law. Her voice was as gentle as always, yet with a hint of alienation. Sherry, are you free? Let's meet. I agreed. We met at a quiet tea house. She was still so elegant and proper, but the fatigue at the corners of her eyes couldn't be hidden. Sherry, Ryan, was transferred by your big brother. I heard. She sighed, took out a card from her bag, and pushed it to me. There's 10 million inside. I know this can't compensate for anything. But Auntie hopes, for old time's sake, you can plead with your big brother. Let Ryan go, and let yourself go too. She looked at me, her eyes with pity. That child Lucian has too cold a temperament, he's not a good match for you. Being with him, you won't be happy. Looking at that card, I found it somewhat amusing. In their eyes, all my actions could be measured and solved with money. Auntie. I pushed the card back. Ryan and I are over. I'm now Lucian's wife. As for whether he's a good match, happy or not, that's my own business. Her face darkened. Sherry, don't be ungrateful. You think marrying Lucian means you can rest easy? The Lu family door isn't that easy to enter. I know. I stood up, so, I'll stand firm myself, no need for your concern. I turned to leave, behind came her furious voice. You'll regret it. I didn't regret. But trouble came knocking voluntarily. That night, I was strolling in the garden when Ryan suddenly rushed in like a madman. He was dead drunk, eyes blood red, grabbing my wrist. Sherry. It was you, right? You complained to my brother? Why does he treat me like this? Let go. I struggled disgustedly, his touch made me nauseous. I won't. Say. What underhanded means did you use to seduce my brother? His strength was astonishingly great, I couldn't break free at all. At that moment, the villa door opened. Lucian returned. Seeing us entangled, his expression instantly cooled. He didn't say a word more, directly walked forward, and punched Ryan's face. Ryan staggered back several steps and fell to the ground. My place, my person, you dare touch? Lucian's voice seemed to come from hell, carrying an eerie chill. He pulled me behind him, looking down at Ryan on the ground like an ant. Ryan clutched his face, crawled up from the ground, alcohol and hatred intertwined, making him lose reason. Lucian. What right do you have? She's something I don't want, what qualification do you have to pick up? As soon as the words fell, Lucian kicked him hard in the chest, the force so great that he curled up on the ground like a broken shrimp, coughing not just alcohol but blood threads. Butler. The killing intent in Lucian's eyes almost solidified. Throw him out. From now on, don't allow him to step in here again. The butler with 2 bodyguards expressionlessly dragged the mud-drunk Ryan out. The world finally quieted. Lucian turned, looking at my reddened wrist, brows furrowed. He pulled me into the living room, took out ointment from the medicine box, silently applying it to me. His actions were light, with a faint gentleness. But in his lowered eyes, I caught a flash of paranoid possessiveness, chilling my heart. What he said, is it true? He suddenly asked. What? He said, you're something I don't want. I raised my head, meeting his bottomless eyes. In your eyes, am I too? I countered. He was silent. After a long time, he spoke, voice low. No. You are the only one I would snatch back at any cost. Under this man's gentle actions hid a chilling madness. At this moment, my last ridiculous attachment to Ryan finally died completely. The day after Ryan was thrown out, Elder Eldon came personally. He didn't come to accuse, just deeply looked at me, then called Lucian into the study. I didn't know what they talked about. I only knew that from that day, no one came to trouble me anymore. Lucian and my life entered a strange calm. We were like co-renting roommates, living under one roof, each minding our own, not interfering. He still left early and returned late, busy with work. I enrolled in several interest classes, flower arrangement, baking, painting, filling my time fully. Just occasionally late at night, when he came out of the study and saw the floor lamp lit in the living room waiting for him and a cup of warmed milk, he would stand silently for a long time. this calm was broken on a rainy night. That day, returning from the studio, I got rained on and developed a fever at night. I was feverish and dazed, feeling someone wiping my face with a warm towel and feeding me water. I struggled to open my eyes and saw Lucian's face close by. His brows were furrowed, eyes showing worry I'd never seen. "Lucian." I hoarsely spoke. He touched my forehead, then his own. "Still hot." He turned to get medicine, but I grabbed his hem. "Don't go." I didn't know why I said those two words. Perhaps the vulnerability of illness, or the occasional gentleness he showed lately, created an unwarranted dependence. His body stiffened. Ultimately, he didn't leave. He sat by the bed, holding my hot hand. His hand was large and cool, yet gave me inexplicable peace. In half-dream half-wake, I seemed to hear his sigh. The next day when I woke, the fever had subsided. Lucian wasn't in the room. On the bedside table was a cup of water and fever medicine. I thought everything that night was just a high-fever dream. Until I went downstairs and saw him at the dining table, with faint dark circles under his eyes, obviously sleepless. Seeing me, he put down the files. "Better?" That's good." He returned to that indifferent appearance, as if the worried man last night wasn't him. During breakfast, he suddenly spoke. "Next weekend, there's a charity gala, accompany me." "Okay." I didn't ask why. I knew this was part of our deal. I needed to play the wife's role well. On the gala day, I wore the starry blue gown he prepared, linked his arm, appearing under the spotlights. We became the focus of the venue. The man handsome and cold, the woman gentle and beautiful, looking so well-matched. A suited man with a wine glass wanted to chat more with me. Lucian unobtrusively pulled me into his arms, coldly glancing at the other. That person immediately retreated wisely. I saw many people, faces with proper smiles, eyes full of inquiry and curiosity. I also saw Selina. She had slimmed a lot, wearing a cheap gown, following a greasy middle-aged man, smile stiff. Seeing me, the jealousy and hatred in her eyes almost overflowed. I faintly shifted my gaze, returning an elegant smile to a noble woman raising her glass to me. Midway through the gala, Lucian took me to the terrace. "Tired?" he asked. "A bit." I nodded. High heels worn long made my feet hurt. He suddenly knelt on one knee before me. I was startled. "What are you doing?" He didn't speak, just lifted my foot, removed the torturing high heels, and with his warm large hands, gently massaged my ankle. Nearby guests passed, emitting soft exclamations. My cheeks burned, I wanted to pull my foot back. "Don't move." He held me. His actions were professional, forced just right, the sore pain soon eased. My heart, at that moment, beat rapidly. Just then, he took something from his pocket and slipped it on my ring finger. It was a ring. Not some pigeon egg, just a simply designed plain band ring, engraved with a small letter S. It was my name. "What is this?" My voice trembled a bit. He raised his head, the terrace lights fell into his deep eyes, like shattering the starry sky. 10 years ago, I was driven out of home, in the corner of a city art museum, about to faint from hunger. My mind buzzed, completely blank. He held my hand and continued, "I thought I would die that day, cold and hungry." Then, a little girl in a white dress, like a beam of light, suddenly appeared before me. She gave me a bread and all the pocket money in her pocket, totaling 200 yuan. The bread's aroma, the boy's pale profile, those warm crumpled bills. Blurry memory fragments instantly overlapped with the man before me. It was me. That person was me. But I didn't even remember what he looked like. "It was you?" I looked at him incredulously. It was me. He stood up, level with me, emotion surging in his eyes. "I've searched for you for 10 years, Sherry. Later, I used every method to find you, but a city is so big, I only knew you wore a white skirt and had dimples when smiling. Until 3 years ago, when Ryan brought you home." I recognized you at a glance. A huge sense of absurdity and being schemed against surged. What were my 3 years of effort? The so-called fancying Selina was just an excuse to draw you in. I know Ryan's character and calculated he would abandon you for his white moonlight. Everything was in my plan. Except. He paused, reached to caress my cheek, voice trembling with excitement. I didn't calculate that watching you smile for him, cry for him, would make me jealous to madness. In that instant, all anger and grievance were shattered by his decade-long unwavering affection. My tears, at that moment, burst forth. After the gala, on the way home, Lucian told me everything. 10 years ago, his mother died, his father quickly remarried, he was driven out, penniless. It was that bread and 200 yuan that got him through the toughest day. Later, he was taken back by Grandpa to the Liu family, but he always remembered that kind little girl. He had been searching for me. Until 3 years ago, he saw the fiancé Ryan brought home. He recognized me at once. But he didn't make a fuss, just silently watched me. He watched my sweetness with Ryan, watched me cook for Ryan, watched me joyfully prepare our wedding. He was jealous to near madness. So, you deliberately released news that you fancied Selina? I asked. He nodded. I knew Ryan had lingering feelings for her. Also knew with his character, he would choose to save his white moonlight. Weren't you afraid I'd be heartbroken and unwilling to marry you? I bet you wouldn't. He gripped my hand tightly. I bet on your pride, not allowing you to become an abandoned victim. Facts prove I bet right. He was a madman, a thorough gambler. And I was his stake, also his only winning side. Ryan and Selina. Selina's end was worse than I imagined. I later heard, in a cheap KTV room, she was forced by a fat-brained investor to drink a whole bottle of liquor. Her former friends cheered nearby, laughing at her turning from white swan to drowned dog. It said, when she vomited terribly, the room TV was showing news of you and me at the charity gala. As for Ryan, Lucian's voice cooled. I didn't make him bankrupt immediately. I let him watch the Northwest project improve, gave him hope, then pulled the rug, making the project collapse overnight, creditors blocking the door. Finally, I gave him a choice: I either roll out in ruin, or go to that bottomless pit as a nominal vice president, lingering on. I had no sympathy. That was their deserved end. Back home, Lucian pinned me against the door and kissed. This kiss was no longer probing and restrained, but full of 10 years longing and suppressed emotions, scorching and intense. Sherry, call my name. He panted by my ear. Lucian. I'm here. That night, starlight brilliant. We were no longer deal partners. We were each other's home. After that, I truly understood Lucian. He would clumsily bring a bowl of oddly colored brown sugar water when I had my period, just because he researched all night. He would frame my doodles on napkins solemnly and hang them in the most prominent spot in the study. He would also sit silently by me when I stayed up working, until I fell asleep, then carry me back to the room. So, loving someone means engraving all their preferences in the heart. Ryan's news occasionally came from friends. Heard he was doing poorly in the Northwest, project no progress, person becoming utterly decadent. He tried contacting me, but I had long blocked all his ways. Past people should stay in the past. A year later, at a city's largest royal enclosure, Liu Group held a grand anniversary celebration. Lucian and I as hosts received guests from all sides. I wore a red gown, abdomen slightly bulging. Lucian protected me carefully throughout, nervous like a first-time dad newbie. Midway through the banquet, I went out for air but in a corner saw an unexpected person. Selina. She was more haggard than last time, heavy makeup unable to cover the vicissitudes in her eyes. Her eyes were ashen numb, seeing me, burst with vicious jealousy, but quickly extinguished. Her gaze fixed on my slightly bulging abdomen, showing twisted despair. I heard, when desperate, she knelt before former friends, getting only mockery and expulsion. She didn't come to provoke, just watched me from afar, then turned and merged into the crowd. Beside her was an ordinary-looking young clerk, the man's gaze at her carried undisguised contempt. For her, this was perhaps accepting fate. As I prepared to turn, a familiar yet strange voice sounded behind. "Sherry." It was Ryan. He was emaciated, much darker, his once spirited face now only had decadence honed by wind and frost. His once bright eyes now only empty and bloodshot, like stagnant water full of regret. Heard Selina quickly climbed new branches after he was transferred, abandoning him long ago. "Something?" I calmly asked. Next month I'm going abroad, may not return." "Oh. Can I say a few words alone with you?" he begged, looking at me. I glanced at Lucian approaching from not far. "No need, Mr. Ryan. Past matters, I've forgotten. Hope you have too." I walked past him, he suddenly reached to grab me. Lucian was faster, blocking in front, gripping Ryan's wrist. "What do you want?" Lucian's eyes were ice cold. Ryan's wrist hurt raw, he awkwardly withdrew. "I just want to say sorry to her." He looked at me, red-rimmed eyes full of regret and unwillingness, like a gambler who lost everything. "Sherry, sorry." His voice hoarse, eyes empty, murmuring, "I always thought everything you did for me was taken for granted. I thought you'd always wait in place." I was truly blind back then. I linked Lucian's arm and smiled. "It's okay, I don't blame you. Because, I have to thank you. Thank you for abandoning back then, letting me meet a better person." Ryan's face lost its last color. He seemed instantly drained of all strength, decadently retreating 2 steps. Lucian and I walked past him, never looking back. On the way back, Lucian was silent. "Angry?" I poked his arm. He didn't speak, just stopped the car by the road, then tightly hugged me. "I'm afraid." His voice trembled. "Afraid of what?" "Afraid you still have him in your heart." I chuckled, held his face, seriously looking at him. "Lucian, listen well. In my heart, from start to end, there's only you. Before, now, and after too." He stared blankly at me, then smiled. That smile like initial snow melt, spring warmth blooming, beautiful, making my heart flutter. He lowered his head, kissing my lips. Outside the window, city neon flickered. Inside, was our lifetime peace. 9 months later, our son was born, nickname Anan. What happened to Ryan later, I don't know, nor want to. Everyone's path is self-chosen. And I am very glad I chose the right path back then.